Um, I'm so pleased to be here. I'm so honored that Greg has allowed us to be part of this. But I will go ahead and introduce Raysean. So we are in Augusta, Georgia. So greetings from Augusta University in Augusta, Georgia. If we have any golf fans, you certainly know our location by the Masters tournament. But we are one of Georgia's 4 research universities with specialized expertise in the health sciences. But our enrollment is around 10,000 students. We're looking to grow that quite dramatically. So Raysean is our digital content coordinator, and he has been instrumental in coming up with ways to improve engagement and also outreach to not only current students, but prospective students as well. He's going to share today some of the things that he has been doing to do that. So he is the founder and host of Augusta University's official podcast, In the Wild. And in addition to the production of the podcast itself and hosting, he's done a phenomenal job with the social presence of the podcast, and he's going to talk more about that. So for anyone thinking of doing a podcast, there's the production lift, but I would say just as important is really the promotion itself and getting it out and engaging in on other platforms. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Raysean, and thanks for allowing us to be part.
So good morning, y'all. I am so very excited to be presenting today. This has been like the highlight of not only my week, but just of this summer, because I was presented this opportunity and I was like, I'm not sure I'm an expert on podcasting and just, emerging media. But as I was getting this presentation and doing the research and preparing the slides and everything together, I was like, I think I've learned a little bit of stuff. So stay tuned, because it's going to be a great opportunity to learn about how you can use audio and just podcasting in general to build and create a whole new platform for your audiences. Like Kristen mentioned, we were able to do a lot of interesting things this past year and a half with our podcast. So I'm going to share all of the best practices that we found and how to integrate that into your already existing digital content strategies. So getting started, let's see if I can share my screen. I think I'm having a little bit of issue with getting my screen shared. So hold on, I'm so sorry, y'all. This is the first time I've presented for a conference on Zoom. So I appreciate the patience. Let's try this again.
While Raysean's doing that, I just want to make a point to help fill some time. Is in addition to being a great golf town, Augusta is a beautiful city. My wife and I have spent some time there since we've moved to Athens. It's got a really nice downtown, and the Augusta University campus is absolutely beautiful. And we have a partnership between UGA and Augusta University, a medical partnership that is really thriving. So, all right, have I filled enough time, Raysean? Are you ready to go?
Give me one more second, because I have to jump into my settings here.
Okay.
Hey, and Ray, I can share too if you need me to.
If you could, that would be awesome, Kristen. Thank you so much for saving me right now.
Okay, I'm gonna see if I can pull it up here. Okay. All right, can everybody see my screen?
There it is.
All right.
So just jumping on in. So like I said before, today we're going to share the best practices that we found in integrating audio into our digital content strategies, because podcasting is definitely, and just audio in general, has grown significantly in the past 5 years. And it's estimated that by 2024, that there will be over 100 million monthly podcast listeners. So if you don't already listen to podcasts, this is a great time to find out some of your favorite ones and how you can steal some things to create your own if you don't already have one. So jumping into our opening slide, just wanted to share a little bit about myself. I am a 2017 graduate from Augusta University, so go Jags. But before I took on this role, I was able to work in social media and those platforms, even since I was an undergrad, to be honest. And I worked with high school students as a college advisor for about 2 years, or a little over 2 years. And working with high school students can be very interesting. And with that role, I really had to learn how to strategize, how to communicate with them effectively with a new, younger audience that doesn't read for very long points of time and will be glued to their phones, but also not very active as we would want them to be on social media. So I came up with a bunch of ideas. So going into this role, I've been able to find different ways to use the podcast and other emerging media platforms to really engage people. And this is something that I love. As a millennial, it's been really fun to kind of figure out what trends are happening and how we can just go ahead and use those. But outside of the office, I like to paint when I'm not in a TikTok black hole. And I also blog outside of TikTok and painting as well. So if you want to learn a little bit more about me, you're all welcome, because we're friends now. Join and connect with me on social media. My links are right there on the slide. So feel free to get connected with me after the presentation. And I will have time at the end for all your questions. So if you have a question at any point throughout the presentation, feel free to just write it down and drop it in the chat. So getting started, why does your university need a podcast? In my opinion, it's no longer a matter of if, but actually when. Because like I said, podcasting and audio platforms are growing each day, and there are new ones emerging. For example, Clubhouse, which happened, I want to say in April of 2020, April or May of 2020, which is a completely audio only platform, which has grown significantly with Apple devices. And I think it just launched a beta version for Android devices. And then you have Twitter, which is integrated audio tweets, and Twitter Spaces, which is the ability to go live on your Twitter account in an audio only version to communicate with your audiences. And when you look at the stats here listed on the slide, you'll see that people are listening to podcasts more and more every day. And it is an awesome activity for them when they're doing something passive. So while they're commuting to and from work, while they're just hanging around at home, or maybe cleaning up or something, they want to passively listen to podcasts. And it makes up the age range of what a lot of our students look like in terms of their age, which is about half of the monthly listeners. And one thing that I thought was very interesting, which we found out to be true in our own social media experience, is that podcast listeners are much more active on every other social media channel compared to others on different platforms. So our Instagram that we have for In the Wild is very active, and those people are the people that are already active on our Facebook, on our main pages, on Instagram, and things of that sort. So we are taking our key people that are already on social media that make up our audience, and they're willing to come listen to us, which is really interesting. And you can also see that comedy, news, entertainment are some of the most popular categories, which is why we decided to kind of make our podcast as informative as it is a little bit modeled behind that as well. And Just another thing to consider when building a podcast is that they give you the opportunity to really extend your brand and build trust with your audience, so you can really find ways to cultivate opportunities to extend your brand and whatever it may be, or opportunities that you may not have with current platforms. For example, a lot of people won't sit around and listen or watch hour-long YouTube video or 30-minute article that you may have, but they will stick around and listen to a 20-minute or over an hour-long podcast. So that can really give you a special opportunity to produce impactful long-form content that may not already be effective on your current platforms. So let's get started talking about my baby, because I'm such a proud papa of this podcast right here, is In the Wild, our official podcast. So we started with our launch in March of 2020, and I already know what y'all are thinking. March 2020, that's triggering. And yes, you're correct, because March of 2020 is when most of us started quarantining. And it was a very, very interesting experience trying to launch something new to our AU community when our students were gone home and everyone was anxious about what was to happen in a pandemic, right? So I was very nervous and very apprehensive about continuing on when our students were no longer here, because my initial thought was, if they're not on campus, will they care about what's happening on campus? And what will we talk about if there's not much happening on campus? Because we really expected to talk with our students and share what's happening in student life and things of that sort. So we really had to be adaptive and flexible, as most of us had to this past year and a half, and create something that we thought our students could still connect with, even though it may not look as we originally intended. And it has taken off. We did not stop. We were able to go into the summer and go into the fall semester swinging, and we completed our second season this week, and we are well over 8,500 plays and downloads. And throughout this past year and a half, we found out how to engage students, pitch out our expert faculty and staff externally, and use it as a tool to connect with our alumni, which is really cool. But one thing that we didn't expect was that we were able to use our podcast to recruit students. So one episode that we had back in January, we were able to talk with one of our students from the Dental College of Georgia, and just trying to see what a dental student who's in their second year, what would that look like for them, especially as she was being able to interact with patients during a pandemic, and trying to just get a good gauge of what that experience was like for her. And she shared with me after the interview had aired that a student reached out to her and said, "Hey, I was considering going somewhere else for my undergrad and maybe coming back to the Dental College of Georgia for my graduate school experience. But after hearing your experience, I want to go to Augusta University for both, for my entire experience there, because I really loved what you had to say and what you shared. And thank you for sharing that." So that opened up a whole new element to what podcasting could mean for universities. Another experience that we had that I believe is worth sharing is that we were able to connect with people coming to our campus, even though it was a virtual event. We had someone come and was able to use that to help promote upcoming events to students, because it was very crazy, right? This past year, trying to keep our students connected. So using our digital media in an interesting way to tell students, hey, we have this person coming on campus virtually, and here's a sneak peek of what they're going to be doing on campus. So you can definitely get creative with how you want to use your podcasting, but those were two special experiences that we didn't even originally intend that you could use to help your podcast. So getting started, before quarantine, it took us about the entire fall semester to really just plan and figure out what we wanted from our podcast, what problems we wanted to solve, who is our target audience, and all of those things. And yeah, it took about 6 months. And so I would really suggest for anyone that hasn't already consider having a podcast is to take your time to be clear on whatever intentions you want to get out of a podcast, because you can be so creative. It does not have to be a talk show or interview style type of podcast that we do. It could be anything. So that first step of brainstorming, be creative as possible, think big, and use this as an opportunity to give your audience something that you don't already have, because it can definitely help, once again, build onto your brand, right? We wanted a podcast that could feel like a central source of information and news for our students that we didn't have before, because although we have social media, we have a news site, we want it to be able to compile all those things and say, hey, if you don't want to go to all these different platforms and pages, you can come to our podcast every week, subscribe and listen, and that way it can give you exactly what you need for that week. So that was our intention, but you can be as creative as you want to. And I guess a more technical thing of getting started when you're in that pre-production stage is to research your different hosting platforms, because although your podcast can be shown on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all the others that exist, those sites aren't where your podcast will live. So you would have to kind of figure out exactly what type of different podcast hosting platform you would want, because everyone, of course, has different features, different pros and cons and benefits. Most are free. Some you can pay or subscribe to each month for a small fee to get different small features. We originally started out with SoundCloud because our university already had a SoundCloud account as our hosting platform. And then recently we transitioned into Anchor, which is a company connected with Spotify to give us a little bit more features and things for growth. Both options were free, but Anchor was designed for podcasting, where SoundCloud is designed for, I don't know, anything and everything, mainly music. But that kind of goes into that last bullet point of being able to locate all of your on-campus resources and using whatever you have before you invest in anything new, because of course your podcast will grow and change. And if you have to deal with the pandemic, you don't know what's going to happen, right? So look at different studio spaces you may have on campus. We're able to find a great one here at our Georgia Cyber Center, which is right down the street from our office here at Communications and Marketing, which worked out perfectly for us, that I'm able to go there once, sometimes twice a week, record what I need to, and drive on back. And we decided to create an Instagram for our social media, and instead of just creating a platform on every channel that there is, we decided to just use our main channels on those other platforms and kind of just use our Instagram as our home base. So those are some of the things that we kind of got started with at the beginning, and then it kind of led into how we wanted to actually promote it. But before we talk into the promotion, here are some just technical tips that I thought would be beneficial. Is that you don't have to have brand new or the most expensive kind of anything, because technology has advanced so far to make us completely capable of doing a lot of things on our phones, on our tablets, and other devices. So you don't need a studio. Just need to have probably 2 good mics, a reliable, quiet place to get started, and you're good to go. And just from a personal experience, it can take a couple days before your episodes are available to the public on these platforms, especially when you're new and starting out, because these platforms like to review your content. So if you have a launch date and you are promoting that launch date, you may want to press publish a few days earlier just to make sure that it is available in time for you to actually promote it. And the last thing that I learned throughout our quarantine experience is that it is perfectly fine and effective to have a virtual interview, because we were able to record virtually when there was a period of time where we weren't allowed to even go inside the studio and have others in the studio. And that was worked out via Teams, via Zoom, sometimes FaceTime, sometimes a phone call. We're able to just capture that audio and have someone edit those things, and the audio turned out decently. So those are some other tech tips. Then getting into format and structure, the first thing I would say is just be aware that your podcast is going to grow and change. So be firm in what you want, but also flexible in how you structure it. Because like I said before, it doesn't have to be a talk show. It doesn't have to be hour-long episodes. You can be creative as you want to really find out what works for you and your audience. What we were able to do for our podcast is do a mixture of both. We are able to weekly do what we call quick jags, our 30-minute episodes where we feature campus news and events and probably someone on within our AU community to promote something happening on campus. But then we also once a month will have a special that is more so topic based, finding a different trending topic that is happening, or we like to call them wild topics for our podcast, and just have that conversation. And that has also been very impactful for our campus because our specials have been our higher performing episodes. Whereas I originally didn't think students would want to listen to us for over an hour talk, but we were able to talk about some serious topics, from sexual assault to racism and all of the social and civil unrest happening last summer, to COVID-19, the vaccine, graduation anxiety, and what to do after you've graduated. All those type of things, we're able to have very in-depth conversations with some of our trusted voices on campus, and our students really loved those type of episodes. And going into the next bullet here of being able to listen to your audience, we really integrated our social media into our show. So we tell our students to talk to us on our Instagram, send us stuff, send me questions, send me topics, and they're able to do that. And we're able to take those things and put them in the show. Sometimes we're able to use our Instagram stories to ask them questions and read off some of their responses. And that also just gives another element of keeping them feeling connected to the podcast, because it's not just our show, it's theirs too, because we want it to be for them. And at the end of each semester, we evaluate of what worked, what didn't work. We check our analytics, and just to be fully transparent, podcasting is still relatively new. So the analytics for that are not as consistent and in-depth as we would like them to be, but we take the analytics that we do get, such as what episodes are performing better than others, the start and stop times for the average listener, and things of that sort, and just demographics that we can take and kind of see what we can change and alter for the following semester. And the last thing, although it doesn't directly apply to our podcast, we would definitely recommend to consider monetization and ads, because that can definitely increase your budget if you are starting from ground zero and you're trying to create a podcast from nothing, or if you wanted to use that as a way to collaborate. One thing we're looking forward to doing this fall semester when we start back our season 3 is seeing how we can use some of our JAG Nation collaborations and turn those into ads for our podcast. Right now, in between segments, we will use internal advertisements to promote different departments and units on campus, and sometimes events and other things. Like we're able to put out a COVID vaccine ad for our students because we're able to do some on-campus clinics and, want to get everyone vaccinated that feels comfortable getting vaccinated. So those were a great opportunity for us to have those short 30-second, 45 to a minute segment ads to just throw in between segments, so that way get out more information to our students in a way that won't deter us from what we're trying to do with our actual show in those interviews. And I wanted to share that one review posted that students have really found this to be a resource for them. They're not just looking at it as solely entertainment, even though we try to, keep it fun, but they're looking at it as a resource. And just in addition to extending your brand, you can also make that a valuable resource to your audiences as well. So, launch and promotion. First thing, don't rush it. It's okay to take a minute to figure out how you want your online presence to be. And like I mentioned before, it is a great idea to start with trying to just integrate into what you already have before you try to create new things, because that can be overwhelming to have several different social media platforms, when really all you need is maybe just one or two. So to get started within the wild, we did create an Instagram, but instead, like I said, of just putting In the Wild on every platform out there, we decided to partner with our news sites, Twitter, Jaguar, to put out content, and with our main channel, our Augusta University channel on Facebook, to put out content as well to help promote. So we kind of got our bases covered, and what I think just fully integrated it and made it seamless part of our digital content strategy. Second is being strategic in how you want to promote your podcast and each new episode that you have, because you definitely want to capitalize with your successful platforms, and you want to find ways to use your students, because those are probably going to be your biggest, most active audience. And we were able to find some of our students with high engagement on social media to get on our podcast, or asking them to create some content for our podcast. And that helped us grow followers, that helped us get a lot more attention within our community, and helped us grow our platform. Kristen, do you mind pulling up Jaguar and our Instagram too? We can start off with Instagram, but there it is right there. We can click on Jaguar, and you see on our news site, each week or each episode that we have, we will do a small brief for those, headline it or with listens, so students know that it's our podcast we're talking about, and just give a small description of who's on it, what we're talking about. But what is super cool to me is that we've embedded our episodes using our Spotify embed right in the episode. So if they come across it on Facebook or on LinkedIn or anywhere else that we share that link, they can easily just access the episode and play it. And if you look on the right side of the screen, you'll see that our Spotify episode is embedded as a sidebar to our news site. So anyone just going on our Jaguar homepage or any article will see our most recent episode, which is awesome. And it has certainly helped all of our analytics grow tremendously, because they can just casually click and find out what we're talking about. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you can see so easily that, just to make it convenient, we put all of our little widgets for our main platforms. And what they'll do is, when you look at it from a mobile perspective, it will open the app for them directly. So if they have Apple Podcasts, they click on that, they're automatically taken to it, and it saves them some major search time, because that can definitely kill the conversion if they have to, type in search and click too many things all at once. You don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. So we put it there for them, so that eradicates that problem. But if you jump on our Instagram, you'll see what I believe, there's our provost, shout out. So if you go on our Instagram, you'll see that this is my baby, y'all. Outside of the podcast itself, we're able to really find different ways to engage our students. So each week we have an episode, we will do a post. We will start off with just a good, nice, old-fashioned photo, and make sure if you click on, Kristen, can you click on Daniel's photo, please? And you see, just within the caption, we make sure we tag every department and unit that has a social media page to help us continue to grow. And we tag Daniel. He is one of our amazing admission counselors, but he's also a dancer by night. And he has created his own dancing movement called Dance to Inspire. And we thought that was an interesting conversation to have, of how he balances both, but also tell our students of what to expect when they come to campus in a couple of weeks, to all our new JAGs out there. And that episode came out earlier this week, but we make sure that we kind of put all that information within the caption to get started. In addition to that post, we also use Reels, because we're trying to keep it fun. So if you click on our most recent Reel, you'll see we had some of our orientation leaders on our podcast, and we were able to just hang out with them for a quick minute and kind of keep the fun going with that. They were able to promote it on their social media channels. We get more followers. The fun keeps going. And you can also, if you care, look at all of the silliness that I get to do in our office for to promote this podcast, because it's a lot of fun to sometimes be able to do a little TikTok or a reel. Another cool thing, if you look at our stories and our highlights, we like to try to be organized and label everything. And we, if you click on our actual story, you'll see we use audiograms, which are audio clips of our episodes to kind of help entice our audience to listen. You'll see we use the app called headliner.app to actually show the little waveform that's live. We use Canva within that app to create the nice little graphic that you see. And those have been a great way to share our podcast out on Instagram to get other people coming in and actually clicking the link to listen to their first episode, because this may be their first experience hearing our podcast. And so we kind of have one of those each episode, sometimes two if we have multiple guests, so that way they get a vibe of what we're talking about. I like to personally choose the funny moments within it, and that can also help a lot to be showing everyone that, oh, that was before we got started this morning. And so audiograms are super special. We also post those on our Jaguar Twitter because we share that with our news site, like I mentioned before, which is really fun to be able to share pieces of that audio, like I mentioned before, on our Twitter. We have a much older audience, so we'll typically use our faculty and staff because that was our strategy on that platform. Our Instagram is heavily on our students and student focus, and then our Facebook is a little bit for everyone. So we share the love with some of everything on that. And we really, really push our podcast everywhere. Even in our weekly Jaguar newsletter, we'll have a section for that so students can click on the most recent episode. And it has really worked out for us. Like I mentioned before, we're rapidly approaching 9,000 plays, which is really impressive for a podcast that's only been around for a year. And we're growing. We're growing with our followers and our subscribers, and really looking forward to this fall season because we're going to be doing a lot more. We're looking forward to doing a lot more video content and called vodcast, which is really fun. And really using this next semester to really pitch out some of our experts, because we have some really cool people at our university and we want to make sure that we can help them share all the lovely information and research and their experiences, as I'm sure everyone has at their respective universities.
Raysean, do you want to talk about the wild cards or the wild box or any of those things before we leave this screen?
Yeah, so we started Wildcard Wednesdays as a way to just engage our students. So we'll post that random question or that trending question that may be happening on campus. So we've done some of the most random things, including talking about rapper Lil Nas X and his Satan shoes, which was crazy. If I'm not sure if y'all are caught up on all things pop culture, but earlier this year, like that was a very wild topic. And we captured their responses. Those are some of the things we started out with earlier in the semester with just using templates. But yeah, we've grown into doing Wildcard Wednesdays of each Wednesday asking them a question and things that they want to be featured on the show, which has really been fun because we're able to directly connect with our audience and put those things right into our show as we build it out each week. And for our wild boxes, we're giveaways, kind of going back to just using all of the resources that you have on campus. That's our lovely, one of our lovely interns that we had for this past semester. But wild boxes, we were able to find a bunch of JAG swag and AU branded merchandise. And actually, we even had the boxes in storage in one of our storage closets, and we're able to use those as giveaways to help students spread the word. So if they were following us, they tagged some friends under the post and they shared the post in their stories, they were able to enter into a giveaway, and they got an In the Wild t-shirt, stickers, and a bunch of other stuff that we just had laying around the office, and we hardly had to spend any money for it, which was really cool. So we did not spare anything when it came to new ideas to get the word out there about our podcast. And even students will see me on campus and they say, "Aren't you in the wild?" And I tell them, "No, I'm Raysean." But yes, that is our podcast. So I'm being recognized on campus, and I can't wait to start this fall because we'll actually be able to table and be have a stronger presence in person on campus. And that was pretty much it for how we integrated our audio into our digital content strategy. And I'm really eager to hear what y'all have questions about. So share away.
So Raysean, so Travis Highfield, hey Travis. Travis actually spent some time in Augusta, so we know him well. What is the time commitment per episode from production standpoint, and how far in advance are you planning each episode?
That is a great question. So to get started, I would say with production, our episodes, like I say, vary. So weekly, we try to have that 30-minute episode, but we also have a 1 hour monthly or close to an hour monthly episode. So time that I spend in the studio, usually probably 2 hours a week, if that. Sometimes just based off different guest schedules, we have to split everything up, but I typically will go into the recording studio on a Tuesday for about 2 hours, record my parts, wait for our guests to come in, do their parts. So production doesn't take too long of a time. In the beginning, we did have to do a little convincing of some people to come on our podcast. So after that back and forth email thread was good to go, it was really easy to just have someone come into the studio and record with us. And now that it's becoming a little more popular on campus amongst our faculty and staff, they're looking forward to being asked, and they don't have as many questions as they did in the beginning. They are ready to go. And I think the second part of your question was, how long do I plan in advance? Usually I try to plan out episodes a week or two before, which, because, we are trying to do news, so trying to make sure things stay current. But for those monthly specials, which have a very long shelf life, we can do those just whenever. So those sometimes will take the back burner if we have some more interesting news, but it really depends, but usually about 2 hours a week.
And Ray, we had several questions about analytics and how you're measuring success of the podcast, and also what tools you're using for analytics.
Another great question. So getting started with our hosting platform, Anchor, they provide a lot of our analytics through Spotify. And that will tell us first and foremost, demographics. So they'll tell us who's listening, they'll tell us how long they're listening, and they'll give us graphs for, how many plays we got each day, each week, and then you can alter it for a longer span of time. And because like I said before, analytics for the platform are tricky because they will capture your RSS feed. Your hosting platform can capture your RSS feed, but depending on your hosting platform, may not give you all the analytics you're looking for. So you may have to look on Apple Podcasts to see what they're saying, look on Spotify to see what they're saying, and other platforms individually. So it's tricky and a little messy to try to compile all that information together. But if you wanted to just use, say, Spotify as your main source of your analytics, and that is one of the reasons why we decided to push Spotify out a little bit more than some of our other platforms, because Spotify works with Anchor to track our RSS feed, so it gives us more accurate analytics versus some of the other platforms. And measuring success, we really wanted to look at some of the time frames that students were actually listening to episodes, right? For an article that may be a 3 or 4 minute read, you may have a very high number for that. But tracking how long an hour episode would be, it was tricky at first because we didn't have anything to base it off of at first. So it kind of took us a semester or two to kind of realize that there's actually a trend of what topics, what conversations really worked for us. So honestly, we had to start from ground zero to see what worked. And then we just took our interactions from social media. We took our ratings and reviews that students had left us on the different platforms to really compile how we measure success. Because in the beginning, because you have, nothing to start with to track, it's gonna have to make that decision for yourself to see if it's actually working for you. But give it some time and you'll kind of see that trend start, hopefully go up and continue to grow.
So Ray, we have a couple of questions about students. The first being, do you do all the hosting or do you use students? And then the second being about promotion on social and making sure, how do you make sure that students don't post anything inappropriate or unprofessional when they're helping to promote the podcast episode?
Yes, so I probably should have said this earlier. So each semester we have a new intern, which has been such an amazing element to have for our podcast because we wanted to target it towards students. So in the beginning, it was very tricky to have my student actually co-host with us because of the pandemic and all the COVID restrictions. We could only have one person in the studio at a time. So all of our things had to be virtual. And just for audio purposes, I was like, okay, we're going to wait on co-hosting until things get a little bit better. So our second semester, we're actually able to have our co-hosts, our students come in the studio and actually co-host and just give segments. And that was really fun. Fun for them because they get to actually put that on their resume. They get to learn and train on the go, but also just have fun, right? Because I want to stay close in age with them. I'm a millennial and I like to have fun with them, but I don't know all the things happening on campus from their perspective, and I don't know all the things that they're interested in. So having a student that I could talk to every day and work with every week to kind of come up with topics and what we should or shouldn't do has definitely been really just like a lifesaver, because sometimes, you run out of ideas. So it's always good to have more than one brain in the room. And in terms of their role, I let them do a lot of stuff on social media as well. So we have a lot of conversations about what's wild for us and what's actually wild and inappropriate. But I found out a lot of students, when you give them a lot of responsibilities, a lot of them live up to the task. I try not to micromanage. I try to empower them to be creative and just make their experience their own that they have with us for the semester. And so a lot of times they may just ask me, hey, is this too crazy? And I'm like, no, that's fine. That's what we want. And of course, with students, you kind of had to build trust with them. So in the beginning, I'm a lot more hands-on. And then towards the end of the semester, I'm letting them kind of do their own thing because they kind of learned what to expect and what not to expect. And of course, I had to kind of create the vibe on our Instagram. And so able to just refer back to them and say, hey, this is what we do. This is kind of what we look for when we mean wild. So if you have any questions about what wild means, just go ahead and ask me. But we haven't had any problems with things being inappropriate on our Instagram. And I hope I didn't jinx myself by saying that.
Thanks, Ray. Well, that's all the questions that we've gotten. If anybody else has any, feel free to put them in the chat. Or Ray, if you have anything in closing.
So the last thing that I have to say is, once again, audio is growing. And recently this summer, Apple has created a feature for a lot of universities to add, or not just universities, companies and brands and everyone else, but podcast channels. So if you have a podcast, or if you have several podcasts and you have different people on your campus podcasting, you can create a channel that will allow you to compile all those podcasts together, so you can create a whole vibe and platform on Apple Podcasts, which is something that we recently were able to create and add. So there is an Augusta University podcast channel. So if you open up the Apple Podcast app, you can see some more about our podcast, but also some of our other podcasters on campus, and see what we're trying to create here. Because like I said, audio is becoming more and more important. is being integrated on more and more platforms. Facebook announced last month that they will allow podcast platforms to host RSS feeds. So Facebook will soon become, looking into the fall, its own audio platform, right? So that will be another opportunity for you to easily be able to share your content out with your people on Facebook. Because I know all of us have huge Facebook followings, right? And so imagine not having to ask them to convert, but just go ahead and share the episode that's already on the Facebook app. So that's something we're really looking forward to having as soon as it's released to us. But it'll really be easy to integrate audio moving forward. And hopefully you'll be able to find a podcast that you love and can create, or just different audio clips and audio content that you can promote.
And we got one more question, Raysean. Have you tried using audio on Twitter?
I have not tried Twitter, but that is something that I really want to dive into in the fall, because that feature I think came out just a couple months ago. And so we're wrapping up our season, because we typically go on hiatus after our spring graduation. So we weren't able to use it, but I have been brainstorming. I have been writing things down of how we could use it. Because my first initial idea was using that as maybe like an after show, as maybe getting some of our guests to come back. And as we talk about the episode, we talk about other things. And that allows our students and all of our audiences to directly interact with our guests or directly interact with our hosts and ask them questions personally. So that is something that we're figuring out as we speak. And hopefully in the fall, we'll have a solid plan, because Facebook is also going to do a similar feature as well that I guess will compete with that. So yeah, we're figuring it out, but that's something I look forward to using.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Raysean, and thanks everybody for your participation. I'm going to pitch it back over to the man in charge, Mr. Greg Trevor.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, Raysean. That was really good. I was I've been going back and forth with Kristen in private messaging, saying how impressed I was by that presentation, and particularly your knowledge and your enthusiasm. It's a really nice way to get the day two started here. So thank you both very, very much.